Hey everyone, it's Kenlyn, and welcome back to my channel for the Astro and Energy Report for the week of the 24th of November. So this week is giving us an opportunity with Mercury, the mind, to go into reflection and basically what the F just happened. So if that's you and you've been asking that, maybe you've been asking that at a subterranean level, deep in your soul, like what is going on with the world? I don't promise to have the answers, but let's use some of the astrology to reflect on what's going on. So if you haven't watched that post-election video, you might want to watch it. I'll put it in the description below because it seems to have pointed some kind of way for some people. I'm still getting comments on it. The thing is, I'm here to weave, I'm here to disseminate good information, and I'm here to create some sense making. And that's not by telling you what to believe, but how we can look at something and how we can use our tools to weave together something that's coherent, because coherency is lost right now. So let's just presence where we are right now. The 24th of November is the day that I'm recording this. And tomorrow, Mercury goes retrograde. And that cycle is about 3 weeks long. So it's going to give us a good long time to understand what has been happening. Now, Mercury rules the mind. Also, it's thought that Mercury, when Mercury goes retrograde, is going to go into the underworld for messages that were not received during the time before, because it's an integration time. And with all the other planets in retrograde, we are clearly in an integration time. Now, Mercury goes out of retrograde before the holidays, but the other planets stay in through the beginning of 2025. So let's presence right now who's retrograded, and then let's get into this conversation that has a little bit of sense making and weaving together of what just happened. And I'm going to rely on some other astrologers and their words to bring this into our weaving today. So, as I said, Mercury tomorrow going retrograde. We have Chiron, the wounded healer, has been in retrograde and is still in retrograde. So think about retrograde as this reflection time, this integration time, and Chiron, the wounded healer, giving us a time to integrate the healing. And we've been presencing that since I remember the eclipse in April, that we were getting a healing because we have Chiron right in the mix with that eclipse. So there's some deep healing that has been taking place and that will continue to take place. But now Mercury is going to help us understand what's happening, put us more on solid ground, even though we know we're in the new world and solid is anything but what's happening. Mars is going retrograde on the 6th of December, and that Mars is going to stay until February retrograded. So that energy has already started. We're already feeling that planet of action, that planet of war, that planet of aggression, the planet of getting shit done is already stationing in that shadow period and then going retrograde on the 6th of December. The sun this week is also trining this Mars, and that's going to give us some extra power to get things done this week. I'm not going to say too much about that, but I do want to presence that there's some really positive forward moving energy right now. So whatever I share today is going to be supportive of moving forward, because we can't move forward if we just get the hell out of the past without really understanding and sense making it. Humans are not here to not understand. We are here to get things clear in our minds, at least have a narrative in our minds. That's how we develop mental wellness. It's a coherence between our left brain and our right brain. So Jupiter is also retrograde, Neptune is retrograde, and Uranus is retrograde. We've got Saturn direct, which is a godsend. So also, we're not having to revisit our lessons. We're able to move forward with the lessons learned. We have Pluto direct, which is good news, as Pluto just moved into 0 degrees of Aquarius, signaling this whole incredible change that we're in right now. So there's a reckoning of what happened before. We must understand it and make sense. Otherwise, we'll repeat the same lessons in new ways going forward. And then Venus is direct. So Venus is in Capricorn right now. Pluto's in Aquarius. They're co-present, with each other. They're having communications with each other. So I love that, because that to me signals the divine feminine is understanding what has died and what is being reborn. Now, I want to just say that the divine feminine is alive and well in our hearts. I know that there's a lot of patriarchal off-gassing that's happening right now, especially after this election. Some of those patriarchal, low-level, good old boys are saying what they're saying. And I don't even want to disseminate their information because I don't even care. They're not that important in my world. What I want to declare and what's important in my world is that I, as a representative of the divine feminine, am alive and well in my power. And so are you. Do not forget that. And that part is the sun, trining Mars, the sun, our purpose, our shining, our radiance with this planet of action. And even that sense of warriorness, like, no, I'm on my purpose. I'm on my dharma, and you're not going to stop me no matter what. I don't care what it looks like out here, because things out here look always lots of ways. And then they shift on a dime. In fact, I was listening to an astrologer, Lunatic Astrology, Lori Lothian, and she was talking about this interesting time leap that she thinks happened. And I just want to presence it. I'm not sure that I think it happened. I'm just considering it. And that is that 2/3 of the astrologers, in her point of view, thought that it was a victory for Kamala Harris in the election. That's an interesting statistic, 2/3. I thought it was pretty close to that, maybe even more. And 1/3 had predicted Trump as president. And she was among the ones that predicted Kamala Harris. And she's Canadian. So she's like, I didn't have any of the biases that maybe US astrologers might have. But she said that right before the election, she did some other kind of divination. And she said to herself, holy shit, Trump's going to win. She felt like it was a timeline shift. And I recognize that. I don't know. I can't say, but I recognize that. I recognize that in my life. And so let's take that as sometimes the way things work. So in mystical teachings, we are told that nothing is as it seems. And what that might mean is also nothing is as our minds perceive it, because our minds only perceive what they've been programmed to perceive. And that programming could come from your past lives, from your parental upbringing, from the friend group that you're in right now, from the things that you read. I did a whole video on being hijacked. I think a lot of people are hijacked in their minds around narratives. So if you just witness the narratives that you're willing to die for, those might be places that you're hijacked. And so reality is going to be different than all of that. And so it's just for all of us to suspend our belief in how we see things, knowing that we see in part. And we still have to move forward. We still have to have a coherent narrative. We still have to create mental wellness for ourselves. And that is by this mystical right brain and this analytical left brain. And it's a both and in there. And each one of us gets to walk that tightrope of how we do that. And some people err on one side or the other. But I'm going to go for a more integrated approach. And if you're watching my channel, you know that that's what I do. And I'm just a stand for that. I have too much practical energy. Saturn's on my moon. There's just no way I can be too out there. But I'm also paying homage to the mystical, spiritual pieces, because to me, that's what makes life worth living. All right. So let me go back to what I was saying. And that is that the divine feminine is here. She is alive. She is well. She is not going anywhere. She has always worked within the nooks and the crannies. So if we had a belief that the divine feminine would come a certain way, either through a feminine president, or if you were not on that side in a different way, we can also just realize that we are that. We're not waiting for something. We are that. Oh yeah, and I have another video to do on the feminine losing her power, but I'm not going to put that in this video. Otherwise, it's going to be too long, because we've got a lot to cover around this Pluto return for the US and the Pluto move into Aquarius. That's what this week for me is asking us with these retrograded planets. There's still places in your own life that you're going to look back on and reconsider and reflect. And please do that through your own journaling. And there's a big collective energy that we're right in the middle of. And it does influence our everyday life in terms of how we reckon with our own power, just like I presenced around the divine feminine. So we've got Mercury traveling through the underworld, we've got the divine feminine, and then we've got all these retrograded planets, and then we've got this sun trining Mars, giving us this no bullshit experience with our purpose and what we stand for. So fast forward to now. We had the election, let's see, however many days ago. It was maybe 2 weeks ago almost. Is that right? 2-3 weeks ago. And we're now trying to make sense of what's happening. The reason why there could have been a timeline shift is because we were in the middle of some fated events, some cycles that astrology always said were going to happen around our reckoning with democracy, which is really our reckoning with power. And what we saw is that Trump was elected, but not only that, we saw that the House and the Senate, and we already knew about the Supreme Court, now the executive branch, are all in alignment. And the United States, to my knowledge, has never had that. at least we had outliers, like we had the Supreme Court. Even if we had the legislative and the executive branches all in alignment, we had the Supreme Court and its more autonomous phase. Or if you don't think it was autonomous, it was at least different. And then we had the established media that people still had some faith in, but we don't have that anymore. So really, the word that I want to use for this period of time we're going into has the name of the planet of death and rebirth, and that is plutocracy. And a plutocracy is the government by the wealthiest. It's a power grab of the wealthiest. And we can see that that's happening. Now, other things may happen, and that's happening as well. That's on that timeline. And in the astrology, that was always meant to happen. I don't mean the plutocracy, I mean the reckoning of our democracy. So I'm going to draw upon the astrologer who I really love. She's a Jungian analyst and an astrologer. She's a medicine woman, wise woman, crone. Her name is Jessica Murray. She is the founder of Mother Sky Astrology. You can look her up, and I'll put her article that I'm going to reference down in the notes as well. So she wrote on the 18th of November an article called What Happened? And I'm going to read parts of it to you because I'm here to disseminate, and I want to disseminate parts of what she's saying. And if you want to read the rest of it, you surely can. So she says astrology is helpful first and foremost because it's a reminder that everything changes. I love that. And she is an astrologer. She's a wicked good astrologer. So I feel like it's better coming from her than from me saying these words. She says, transits keep transiting. Everything is a phase. This is something we know intellectually, but we forget emotionally, especially when we're in crises. And isn't that true? We always globalize like it's shit and it's going to be shit forever, when really everything is a phase and nothing is as it seems. She said, secondly, the big transits, the ones that track centuries rather than years, give us the long view. And they tell us which way the wind is blowing, world consciousness wise. Those are the transits that have been operative, that astrologers have been tracking, that happened in 2020. So people have been tracking what's going to happen in 2020 and beyond. Astrologers, I should say. So she says, I'm pretty sure future astrologers are going to remember this election season as the last gasp of the country's Pluto return. Now, remember, the United States has Capricorn, Pluto in Capricorn at 26 degrees. So we were right in it. And countries have Pluto returns. That's Pluto on your natal Pluto. So transiting Pluto hits your natal Pluto, but people never have it because we're usually dead by then. It's the final nail in the coffin of a 250-year-long era during which the country played out its classic Capricornian power plays, power trips. The past couple of years have been the transit's last hurrah. That's really good to put it in context. So we've been experimenting as the United States with democracy for this 250 years. So for a decade and a half, the planet of breakdown has been hovering around its natal placement in the US. That's that Pluto return. And it's been focusing like a laser beam on our version of worldly power. Now, this is super important. This is why this plutocracy thing is coming into view. The wealthy, which is the second house. So if you know astrology, the first house is this I am, the body, our beingness here. And the second house is our resources. And that Pluto in the United States chart was in the second house, money. So worldly power, wealthy white men on top and everybody else on lower rungs. That is plutocracy. Well, government. Now, then we elect them, and that's government by the rich. It's the way, now here's the really important for us to know. It's the way the US has defined political power since it was born. This is a good point. In the 18th century, when the Electoral College, a well-regulated militia made any kind of sense. So I'm not going to get into it here, but the framers of the Constitution were white males, privileged white males with a lot of power. Since then, the construction of power has devolved to the point of putrefaction. She's got a very good command of language, exemplified by the grotesque idea that corporations should have more rights than human beings. That's Citizens United. That law is what really killed us as a country. But it's law. That law is what has made this moment possible. Let's say that. So Pluto entering Aquarius now, and the new era will raise new problems. They'll be extreme because Pluto, and they'll be different because it's Aquarius. Like AI, climate meltdown, those things will be really hitting their stride in 20 years, right? Because we're at 0 degrees. It's got to go all the way through this sign, which is every sign in whole house is 30 degrees. And so populations will react and respond and will match. And that's why we're getting our consciousness shored up now, because the actions we take now by who we're being is what's going to create what's possible in the future. She says, but we're not there yet. We're not there yet. We're not in that 20-year mark. We're here at the beginning, and we're still assimilating the death throes of that old era. That's why I'm having this call right now, this connection right now. That's why these retrograded planets are giving us an opportunity to rethink this stuff. Okay, so let's move on to it. There's a couple other things. Now is the time to look at the country's dying institutions with dispassionate clarity, right? And that's what I was saying after the election. At some point, you're going to have to get to neutral. Neutral is actually a freaking superpower of the higher realms. And it doesn't mean that we're not human and have to go through our emotional processes. It's a superpower. So once we have gone through the emotional processes, we're here with like a laser sharp drishti. So we're here to witness and reflect on these dying institutions with dispassionate clarity. We have learned that the conventional ways of politicking, which is Capricornian, are freaking over. They don't apply anymore. The polls are unable to accurately predict. People will vote against their own interests, and the establishment media is struggling to uphold as an expiring fourth estate, meaning that it used to be this check and balance, this establishment media, but it's not anymore. People don't believe the establishment media. And in this article, she talks about how the establishment media tried to apply rules of sanity to insane positions. As a result, gaslit the American people. So you can get into that on your own, but it's just showing like how all of this stuff is just crumbling. We've lost faith, and it's at a loss to tell us what it all means. And I've been reading a lot on what other people think it means. I've read different versions, and there's not a whole lot that I'm super inspired by. That's why I come back to astrology. I'm way more inspired by astrology. Okay, so she says, how did it happen? I'm not going to go into that. That to me is, the breakdown of the Mars Pluto. And everyone was talking about Mars Pluto as in the picture when the election was happening. But I am going to move and fast forward to the end. And, sometimes when you're super smart, you can be nihilistic because your logical brain takes you to a logical conclusion that's pretty nihilistic. But I think sometimes when there's a reckoning, you can't afford to be nihilistic. You can be nihilistic in luxury, but when it really is happening right before your very eyes and shit's crumbling, you better come up with something better than nihilism. Or just don't say anything. So she's smart. Reality checks. This is the last part I'm going to read, and then we're going to move on from here. Astrology tells that these years were always going to feature impassioned debates about the end of democracy. Okay, so here we have that timeline. Yep. Maybe so. These years were always going to feature impassioned debates about the end of democracy. Now, I heard her say something I want to presence before I move on, that Jessica Murray also said that in the US chart, and I'll try to find this and do a video on it later, that in the United States chart, the reason why democracy has survived as long as it has is because there is something that she attributes to that's very creative and could be the reason why we have been able to sustain democracy for this long. And what is democracy? But all people are created equal. I'm just going to use that. And every one person, one vote. I'm just going to say it simply. And she said that after this trial and tribulation period with respect to democracy, we will have another opportunity to revisit it. So it's important to clear-headedly face the carnage that we're leaving behind. So from this perspective, and that's the perspective of that it was written that we were going to have these impassioned debates because shit was going down. From this perspective, Trump is not a human figure. This is really important, particularly those who hate him, or even if you love him. He's not a human figure. He's a mythic figure. He served a role. I think a lot of us can agree with that. He is a messenger of the God of destruction and renewal, the star of a mortal drama with which the American group soul was fated to reckon. I mean, that right there is an epic piece of writing. Sit with that. A couple more things. The most unsettling aspect of this drama is that there is no longer a consensus standard in the public conversation. And that's really why I feel so impassioned to do this live stream. because we get to remake ourselves, not by what other people tell us. This is an Aquarian model, and she's going to say something about that. So stay tuned for that. I'm going to read that, but it's going to come through us. It's as if this country has lost a common language. Don't we feel like that right now? I mean, even in the spiritual world, I'm going to address that. I don't know if on this video, but certainly another video with the Kundalini yoga, and just cults and all that, we have lost, even in spirituality, we have lost a common language, provoked a kind of existential drift. And so if you're a healer, a teacher, a shaman, a guide, a visionary leader, a feminine leader, this is where we come in. And she says it's symbolized in astrology by the cycle of Saturn reality and Neptune illusion. She said those two planets squared each other in 2015, and that's where the concept of fake news reared its head, and they're going to co-join in the spring. So more on that. Those two are playing with each other, and we're pawns. So we get to wake up. Now, finally, I'm going to end with this, the long view. So she says, what's now? If the old institutions are crumbling, that's Pluto, and the reality mechanisms are no longer reliable, that's Neptune, what are we left with? She says, we're left with the long view. How many are playing the long view? How many are playing the long game? This election, this is super important. This election was not the end of the country. Realistically, things don't end. I love that. Phases have endings, but the processes of which they are a part of, they just don't stop moving. And we talked about that in the last video with Krishna and Arjuna. You know, what will you do if I don't go into battle and do my dharma? Well, I'll just destroy the world and start all over again, because we keep moving. We keep moving on. It never ends. The play of consciousness, as far as we know it, does not end. So we get to evolve. She says the idea of endings is a human conceit. And that's really reflective of how we handle death, isn't it? In the collective, like death is the ending. You know, the Tibetans never said that. There are 6 phases of life, 3 of which happen after you die. Okay, how do you explain that sentence? All right, the final thing here. The evolutionary momentum of society is stronger than this man and this regressive movement. So whichever side you're on, I want to presence this. Because she says this, workers who've seen the possibility of an increase in minimum wage are not going to stand for going backward. Women are not going to stand for going backward. They're not going to agree to being barefoot and pregnant, you know, or whatever our version, the Handmaid's Tale. She says Christian nationalism may be having a resurge, but historically speaking, the church is on its last legs. That's because most of that church is dogmatic, and it's a low worldview. When it's dogmatic and it tells people what to believe rather than inspiring them with their own autonomy, it's got to go. And new ways of meeting and finding God will come into play. We know that in our hearts. The non-white people of the world, as their numbers ascend, they have no intention of going back to slavery. So that's not to downplay the hardships people are experiencing, but I think it's to reality check us that the progress that we have made in consciousness and in our self-determination, who we are for ourselves and who we are for each other and who we are for the collective, we're not giving that up. No, not at all. And so we got to play the long game. And I think not just that, because we don't have to say the future will be better. That's also part of the Kool-Aid. It's here and now, right here and now. I am that here and now. So the opportunity of the moment, sister, brother, whoever's listening, is to tune into your own power in the here and now. Because that is the building block and the foundation of whatever it is that we will build for the next generation, that we will be a part of for the next generation. Our victim consciousness, that's not going to build anything very good. Our blame, that's not going to build anything very good. Our shame, that's not going to build anything very good. Narcissism, no. People pleasing, no. So I think we're clear that there's some traits that are not going to build the world we want to step into, the world of even the now moment. So as Pluto is in this 0 degree point of new beginnings, he's asking us to move forward powerfully. And the retrograded planets that are not Pluto are saying, okay, great, let's do that. And let's learn, let's reflect. Who am I now? Who do I want to be? What do I want to create? That is why we said yes to this. And indeed, she ends with that. And I should really end with that myself, because this is not nihilism. So she said, Pluto return did a splendid job. So thank you, Pluto. Let's say thank you. It was supposed to take us back to the beginning of the great American experiment 250 years ago by kicking the group soul into remembering what it was like for a fledgling democracy. It was wild and it was a crazy ass idea, right? We came from monarchy, like people need to be told what to do and need to be dominated. And we had a vision. We, the collective soul of America, had a vision. And she says, our job is to seek out and hold on to the essence of that idea and to let go of everything else that's rotten. It's going to take us some time to sift through that. And we can't get hijacked while we're doing it. There'll be a lot of bright, shiny objects saying, yeah, but give me your power and I'll promise you this. And we have to say, you know what? No, you don't own my power. It's not for sale. The healthiest way to navigate the upcoming years is to find our place in them as if our soul, our very soul, determined that we would be here, as if our soul chose it. And as an astrologer, she says, of course, I believe we did. And she ends by saying this, and I want to cry and I want to say kudos to her for acknowledging this from the perspective of your soul blueprint and the fact that you are here. You may just find when you really truly see yourself and you really see the gifts and the medicine that you bring, that you indeed were meant for this moment. Let's rub our hands together, taking all that we have seen and are going to see, and all the positive energy that we're generating, and let's beam it out, wrapping the whole world in gold energy as we remember who and what we really are. And may all beings benefit from the merits of our efforts.